Hi everyone, welcome back. This Sikha is a very interesting Sikha. It deals with Shabbos Mavarchim, the Shabbos before the new month. It deals with the month of Kislev and the significance of Kislev and Hanukkah and Uniquenes Kislev, the 19th of Kislev, which is the Rosh Hashanah of Hasidus, all kinds of stuff. It's a very interesting Sikha. I think you'll enjoy it. The Rebbe starts. This was said, by the way, in the 24th of Cheshvan in 1982. So the Rebbe says that Shabbos Mevarchim, in which we bless the new month, is associated with Rosh Chodesh. It's associated with the month to come. We know that the months of the year in Hebrew are based on the moon, because the Jewish people are compared to the phases of the moon. As the moon waxes and wanes, gets larger and gets smaller, similarly the Jewish people are compared to the moon. Unlike the non-Jews that are compared to the sun, we are compared to the moon. And therefore our Jewish calendar goes according to the moon. And we have various customs associated with that. For example, there is a custom that people do not get married during the latter part of a month, usually, not always, but usually, because the moon is on the descent. And the descent of the moon, as the moon gets lesser, is not considered an auspicious time, as opposed to the beginning of a month, which is very auspicious because the moon is getting greater. So it's considered good luck. The idea of Shabbos Mevarchim is that we say a blessing for the new month to come. And as is custom in most shuls, they announce when the Moiled is, when the moon will be actually anew, at exactly what time. They will announce it to the day, the minute, and the second that it happens. Usually the rabbi or the gabbai will stand up and say, the Moiled will be on certain day, certain hour, certain minute, and certain portions of a minute. So in the old days, they used to do it in Yiddish, Hamoiled, Vetzain, Montik, but today most synagogues, they do it in English. So the idea of Shabbos Mevarchim is that we are preparing ourselves and getting ready for the new month. The only thing is Shabbos Mevarchim is a relatively new innovation. It was not done in biblical times. It was not done when Jewish people were living in the land of Israel. Because, for one thing, we didn't know when the Moiled was going to be. Witnesses would come from outside of Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim is where the Sanhedrin met, and the Sanhedrin, or the Anshe Knesset Hagedola, would announce when Rosh Chodesh was. And since we really didn't know when it was, because it had to be announced and it had to be declared by the sightings of the moon by actual witnesses. And these witnesses would usually be out there outside the city limits, because the city was very bright with all the lights and everything. And they would need to go out of the city limits. And then they would rush, when they saw the new moon, they would rush in to Yerushalayim, appear before the Sanhedrin. It was during the daytime, only during the day. And then the Sanhedrin would declare that the new moon is tomorrow, or the day after. And it was declared that way. One of the popular places for the Jewish people to be there to declare the new moon was in the city of Jericho. The word Yericho it comes from the word Yerech, which means a month, but it's also one of the words in Hebrew for the moon. So Yericho was a very common place where they would declare the month, the new moon, and they would come into Yerushalayim to do it. So since they really didn't know when the Moiled was going to be, there was no need to announce it. Everybody knew the month was coming up, but they really didn't know exactly what day exactly it was. But nevertheless, it became a custom as Jews left Israel and we established a calendar. So it became known exactly at the very minute that the Moiled would be, based on the calculations of Hillel and later calculations which established the Jewish calendar. So what is Rosh Chodesh exactly? Rosh Chodesh is peculiarly associated with the godly service of Jews, as we will explain, as the Jewish people are renewed just as the moon is renewed. The Rebbe says similarly, each Shabbos of Orchim is unique and it corresponds to the special distinction of the coming month. So everyone is special. The Rebbe used to give a Farbrengen every year, every month on Shabbos of Orchim. That was when he would Farbrengen. Each month has its own name, as we know. The names are ancient names. Many of them were given in Babylon. Before Bavel, before the Babylonian exile, the months were known more by the number. The first month, the second month. Certain months were special associated. For example, the month of Nisan was Chodesh Aviv, the spring month. But most of them were all given names of the month. For example, Tishrei was called the seventh month. The seventh month. Shavuos, the month of Sivan, was called the third month. And that's usually how the Torah calls it. In Babylon, when the Jewish people were exiled to Bavel, they established for themselves names of months, which were mostly Babylonian names, Iyar, Tammuz, Shvat, these names, but they very often had Hebrew or Jewish significance as well. And to this day, we refer to these months by their ancient names. And these names, even though they were Babylonian names, very often express certain qualities for the month in Hebrew. And it's a reflection of this vitalizing force that gives life, gives chayus to the month coming up. So the Rebbe says that everything is to be used in a Jew's godly service. The unique vitalizing force, the force that gives life to the coming months, is the essence of that month, and therefore it should be used in one's service. So it's sort of been lost, except for Orthodox Jews, to refer to the months of the year. It's funny, in the secular calendar, everybody knows the names of the month: January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. Very quick. You can say the names of the month in your sleep. How many of us can say the names of the months in Hebrew? How many of us can do it? Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, etc. How many of us know exactly what the months are? When I teach people who are new to Jewish tradition, Bali Tshuva, or people who are converting to Judaism, one of the things I teach them is the names of the months and the significance of the names of the months and the significance of those particular months. Even though in many cases no one's going to ask them about them, but nevertheless, I think they're very important that we should use those names, and we should be familiar with them, as we should be familiar with the Hebrew years as well. Now we're in the year of Tavshin Pei Aleph, 5781. So I think it's important that we should know the names of the months. I think it's important, and the year that we're in. Anyways, so the Rebbe says that everything is to be used in a Jew's divine service. The function of Shabbos Mevarchim is to bless and draw down divine assistance for the service of that particular month. So Shabbos Mevarchim brings a certain divine energy into the coming month that we're coming into, and therefore it has a special quality to it. And and this Shabbos, this particular Shabbos, we bless the month of Kislev. The central theme of its service is expressed in the name, which besides Kislev is also known as the third month. The third month. Now here is the problem. The problem is that there are different ways of calculating the months. We can calculate the months based on Nisan, Pesach, when the Jewish people became a nation. And in most cases, the Torah refers to the months based from Kislev, from Nisan. So Nisan is the first month, etc. That makes Tishrei the seventh month, when all the holidays are, and so it goes. But in other respects, we calculate the months from Tishrei. Tishrei is the birthday of the world, and therefore we can also calculate from Tishrei. And the sages learn that they call Kislev actually by the third month. Kislev would be the third month from Tishrei, which is the beginning of the year. When starting from Nisan, the third month is Sivan. From Tishrei, the third month is Kislev. So the third month from Nisan is Sivan. The third month from Kislev from Tishrei is Kislev. So there has to be a connection between those 2 months, between Sivan, which is the month of Matan Torah, when the Torah is given, and Kislev. What happened during Kislev? So we're going to see that actually there is a connection. In both Sivan and Kislev, the Torah was given. What? The Torah was given during Kislev? How so? So the Rebbe points out, very interestingly, that Kislev, what's the special events of Kislev are, of course, Hanukkah, which is the 25th of Kislev, but something else happened during Kislev. And that is, the Alter Rebbe, the founder of the Chabad movement, was released from his imprisonment, his Tsarist imprisonment, on the 19th day of Kislev. And it was right after that that he put together the Tanya. And he revealed to us so much of the Kabbalistic, mystical, or we call it in English, esoteric wisdom. Before that time, esoteric wisdom, mysticism, Jewish mysticism, was only really for a select few of great scholars, of holy, pious people. But it was after Yutes Kislev, shortly after that, about the year 1812 or so, that Nistar Torah, the hidden aspect of Torah, was also revealed. Just as during the month of Sivan, the external, exoteric aspect of Torah, Nigla de Torah, was given on Shavuos, so on Kislev, the esoteric aspect of Torah was revealed then. So in this respect, Kislev and Sivan, both being the third month in their own way, were also privy to a revelation of Torah wisdom. The Talmud, he said, the Gemara in Shabbos states that the connection between the third month and Torah, he said, blessed be the merciful one who gave the threefold Torah. We're talking about now Shavuos. Shavuos was given on the third month, the month of Sivan, from Nisan. And the Gemara explains that the threefold Torah, namely Torah, the 5 books of Moses, Nevi'im, the prophets, and Ksuvim, the holy writings, that's 3, were given to the threefold people, Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim, through a third person, Moshe, who was the third son of Amram and Yocheved, on the third day of the month, which is the third day of Sivan, which was a day that the Jewish people prepared themselves for the receiving of the Torah on the 3 days later, on the 6th day of Sivan. And Sivan is the third month in which the revealed aspect of Torah was given. And Kislev was the giving of the inner esoteric Torah on the 19th of Kislev, also the third month. Torah was studied even prior to Matan Torah. We know that the Avos, the forefathers, studied Torah and kept the Torah. We know that. Even Adam fulfilled mitzvahs But our forefathers studied Torah only because they themselves were on a lofty level. So when Abraham taught other people to desist from idolatry and to serve God, it was specifically Abraham who revealed this truth, not God. Abraham did it. So even though they studied Torah and they kept mitzvahs, at least the Avos did, the forefathers did, and their wives, Torah in it itself was not yet revealed to the world yet. God did not reveal to the world. And because God didn't reveal it to the world, so therefore there was no such thing as holy objects. Tefillin was not holy. A siddur was not holy. There was no such thing as a holy object because only God could infuse godliness and holiness into an object, and that was not to take place yet until the Torah was given. And this was the innovation of Matan Torah, that holiness came down to the world, that physicality would be infused with godliness. And the higher not ascend to the lower was annulled. That was when it says, Hashemayim Shemayim Lashem, the heavens were the heavens to God, Va'aretz Nasan Livnei Adam, and the earth was given to man, and the Aretz, earth, and Shemayim, heavens, were separated. This decree was annulled when the Torah was given. Likewise, in the Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah of the esoteric wisdom in the month of Kislev. In Sivan, the entire Torah was given, both the exoteric and the esoteric. Everything was given in Sivan. However, the main revelation then was of the exoteric, of the revealed aspect of Torah. Even though all aspects of Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu studied Kabbalah and Chassidus, and they knew all these things, but it was not revealed yet into the world. It's interesting, I studied once in a yeshiva in Israel, a very Lithuanian yeshiva we did not study Chassidus in that. I studied it privately. And one time the Rosh Yeshiva, who was a very, very great man, he called me over and he asked me if I study Chassidus. And I said, I do. And he said, you study the Tanya? I said, yes. He said, well, I don't. He was trying to explain to me how it's so difficult. A plain old yeshiva bacher like me should not really study it because I'm not going to understand it. He said, well, can you please tell me why you understand it and I don't? I thought that was kind of funny because here he's a very great Rosh Yeshiva, and he's admitting to me that he doesn't understand Chassidus, and me, a simple plain yeshiva guy, can understand it, and the great Rosh Yeshiva can't. And the reason is because I studied it with teachers who also understand it. And for us, it's revealed. For him, it wasn't revealed yet. It just wasn't revealed. He couldn't get it. It just did not understand it. I remember the first time I came to Chabad Yeshiva, I also didn't get it. I didn't understand it. There were concepts that were foreign to me. I didn't understand the idea of the 10 Sfirot, or the 4 Olamos, the worlds, or the various aspects of godliness, Ein Sof, or Ein Sof, and these types. I had no idea what these things are all about. I had no concept of them. But once I started studying them under proper supervision of people who knew what they were talking about, suddenly it dawned on me. Suddenly I got it. And therefore, you find many people who are great Torah scholars, who have gone through the entire Talmud many times, have no idea when it comes to the esoteric wisdom of Judaism. They have no idea about it. It's interesting, one time, when I was studying in the yeshiva in Morristown, New Jersey, a young man, it wasn't Morristown, it was in the yeshiva in Israel. And a young man came into the yeshiva who was not at all religious, who was dressed in jeans and things like that. And he asked us if we could teach him Kabbalah. If we could teach, does anybody here know anything about Kabbalah? The guy said, I'm sorry, you got the wrong place over here. We don't study that stuff here. We don't know. Where should I go to study Kabbalah? So they sent him to Chabad. They sent him to the Chabad Yeshiva. And there he was able to learn the deeper esoteric aspects. He came out of it, oddly enough, this Baal Tshuva, this guy with very limited background, came out of it knowing more than the Rosh Yeshiva did, than the Rosh Yeshiva in my yeshiva, because it was not revealed to the Rosh Yeshiva yet. He didn't allow himself to have it revealed to him. So the Rebbe says, however, the main revelation then, during the giving of the Torah in Sivan, was the exoteric, the external, the revealed aspects of Torah. Halacha, Gemara, Mishnah, Midrashim, things like that. Comprehension and understanding of it, of the esoteric, its revelation, united it with the essence of a person, was accomplished on Yutes Kislev. So the comprehension and the revelation of Panemius HaTorah, the inner aspect of Torah, was revealed on Yutes Kislev, which oddly enough, interestingly, was also the third month from Tishrei. Hanukkah preceded the revelation of the esoteric as a festival. After all, Hanukkah was some 2,500 years ago, and Yutes Kislev was only about 150 years ago. So Hanukkah came about in a time that the deep aspects of the revealed of the innermost aspect of Torah was not revealed yet. It too is associated with the third month, Hanukkah, obviously. So he said the Midrash relates in Yalkut Shimoni, the work of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle in the desert, was finished on the 25th of Kislev, Hanukkah. That's when they finished putting together the Mishkan, but it was not erected until the 1st of Nisan. It says, on the first day of the first month you shall erect the Mishkan. So the Mishkan was not formally dedicated until Nisan. So he says here that the work was finished, but it was missing on being in the month in which it was erected. There was no holiness to it. There was no godly revelation to it. At that, God did not come into the Mishkan yet. The Holy One, blessed be He, said, I will repay Kislev for missing out, because since it was finished on Kislev, but Kislev missed out on having the revelation of godliness in the tabernacle. So God said He'll repay Kislev. How? With Hanukkah of the Chashmonayim, when the Beis Hamikdash was rededicated. And Hanukkah was the rededication of the second Beis Hamikdash. So even though Hanukkah was not the dedication of the first of the Mishkan, which was the very first, we know that there were actually three major temples. There was the Mishkan in the desert. There was the Mishkan Shiloh was, and these other Mishkans that were in Eretz Yisrael, when the Jews crossed over, had the aspects of the Mishkan of the desert. It was all considered part of the desert's Mishkan. Many of the curtains and the objects, the altars and things like that, were from the Mishkan in the desert. And then there was the first temple built by Solomon, and the second temple built by Ezra and Nehemiah. So actually there were really even though there were many more, there were really three basic temples. And so the first temple was the first temple, which was the Mishkan, was dedicated in Nisan, but it was finished on Kislev. And the second temple, skip one temple, the second temple was rededicated by the Chashmonayim, that's in the Hanukkah story, indeed, on the 25th of Kislev. So the 25th of Kislev was connected to the dedication of the original tabernacle in the desert. Interesting. They finished the tabernacle on the 25th of Kislev, and the second temple was rededicated after the war with the Maccabees on the 25th of Kislev also. Hanukkah was a rededication. Therefore, when the Mishkan built by Moshe in the desert is counted, it is the third Mishkan, the Mishkan, first temple, and the second temple. And this is the connection with Hanukkah being on the third month. So to clarify this point, the Rebbe points out the Mishkan involved two components: the work of the Jews building it, and God's presence dwelling in it. So there were the two aspects. The Mishkan was finished on the 25th of Kislev, but God's presence did not dwell there until Nisan, when it was erected, when it was dedicated. God's compensation to the month of Kislev for missing out on this special revelation of godliness was in the Second Temple, and after having defeated the Greeks, the revelation of God's presence was all that stronger, in contrast to the previous defilement of the temple by the Greeks. This is the reason why the Hanukkah lights will never be extinguished. Similar to the Mishkan, which being the work of Moshe is also eternal. The work of the Mishkan is also eternal. It's buried someplace, we don't know where it is, but it's there. Thus, the central point of Kislev is that it became perfect, specifically after the previous impurity and darkness caused by the Greeks. So here's a very interesting point that the Rebbe makes, that the Second Temple was rededicated after a period of impurity. After it was defiled, then it became rededicated. He says the same applies to the revelation of the esoteric wisdom during this month. It was only after the darkness of the exile became extremely intense that the esoteric was revealed to the world. During the 1700s, during the times of the Baal Shem Tov and the early Hasidic movement, there was a great deal of opposition to Hasidus, but more than that, there was poverty of body and poverty of spirit during that time. This was times of great pogroms in the Ukraine and in Russia, terrible persecution, and it culminated in the Alter Rebbe being arrested on false charges of supporting Russia's enemy in Eretz Yisrael, the Turks, and the Alter Rebbe was actually sending the settlements of Eretz Yisrael money to help them. He was actually slandered by his opponents, Jewish opponents, and he ended up spending about a month and a half in a terrible Tsarist prison. Which can't imagine what the conditions must have been like, especially for such a holy man in such situation. But it was after that he came out, and his tremendous wisdom was revealed to the world, which was a godly, esoteric, holy, mystical philosophy. That's really when Hasidic philosophy took off, and that's really when it became known. Interestingly, even the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid of Mezrich, his successor, did not study and did not learn the extent that the Alter Rebbe learned and his revelations. The Maggid of Mezrich explained Kabbalah based on the teachings of the Arizal, while the Baal Shem Tov really said very little about it, but rather his teachings were more based on the Zohar, which came much earlier than the Arizal. The Alter Rebbe combined together the Zohar and the Kisvei Arizal, the works of the Arizal, as well as the Arizal's teacher, Moshe Cortavero, as well as his student, Reb Chaim Vital, and others, and incorporated into a brand new idea that was not even known even by the Baal Shem Tov, even by the Maggid of Mezrich. It was a tremendous revelation of godliness and godly wisdom that never came about before. So the Rebbe points out that the Hanukkah lights are lit at the entrance of the house on the outside. Chassidus is the spreading of the well springs to the outside. Before, in olden days, after the temple was rededicated For many centuries, the Jews did not light a menorah in every home by every person like we do today. Usually it was just one person lit it, one person in a household or one person in a community lit the candles, and it was not increasing one after the other after the other. It was one candle. They lit one candle to commemorate the rededication of the temple. But it was only later that the lights of the menorah became more known and became more widespread, just as the study of Hasidus is also Mishiafusu Ma'inasecha Chutza, spreading the well springs outwards, in a way of Persume Nisa, of publicizing the miracle, just as we talk about on Hanukkah. And where do we get the strength to carry out this theme of Kislev? It comes from Shabbos Nevarchim. When the month is blessed and receives vitality for its service. So all of these things come about. The energy, the spiritual energy comes about through Shabbos Nevarchim. In practical terms, despite the victory of Hanukkah, we still live under non-Jewish rule. During the times of the Second Temple, and including during the story of Hanukkah, we were never in charge of our own country. We never had our own republic until 1948, I guess, when the State of Israel was founded. In ancient days, during the times of the First Temple, we did. But even later, they didn't. But during the times of the Second Temple, and throughout this entire time of exile, the Jewish people always lived under non-Jewish rule, whether it was Babylonians or Persians or Turks, the Ottomans or the British or whatever it may be. During that time, we always lived under non-Jewish rule. Jews are still in exile, and the final redemption has not yet come yet. Even though we have a state of Israel, but we're still in Golus, we're still in exile. Mashiach has not come yet. But we shouldn't despair. We shouldn't give up. Even though Mashiach has not come yet, God has shown us that the idea of Kislev is to overcome darkness, and what is more, to convert the darkness itself into light. This has been a theme of Chabad and the Rebbe ever since the beginning. The Alter Rebbe used to call his Hasidim lamplighters. Lamplighters. Their job was to light the lamps, light the neshama found inside of each and every Jew. Because every single Jew had that potential, and he used to call it to be a lamplighter. The increasing intensity of exile, as things get darker, they seem to be getting darker, with all kinds of problems with our enemies and with anti-Semitism in the world today is becoming a very popular, unfortunately, a very popular theme. Jewish organizations are all talking about anti-Semitism, and it's a real concern. It's a real problem. The BDS movement, the terrorism, the Islamic terrorism that's happening, it's still a problem, and Jewish people still find themselves in a sense of exile, and this is combated with the revelation of Hasidus. Hasidus is the spiritual way to combat anti-Semitism. If we want to get rid of anti-Semitism, we should learn Hasidus. Through spreading of Hasidus to the outside, the darkness can be eliminated and become light. I read an interesting thing that in Israel, the Rebbe started his seven mitzvahs b'nei Noach campaign. We always have a new campaign to spread the observance of the 7 basic laws of Noah to the world, to the non-Jewish world. Don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery, belief in one God, be kind to animals, and establish courts of justice in the world. So we print these little cards with the 7 laws of Noah on them, and we go out and we encourage non-Jews to take these cards and to observe these things. And in Israel, who do they go out to? They go out to Christians and Arabs. And they're not afraid to go. They go into Christian villages, hopefully, which are safe villages. Many of the Arab villages are quite safe. They're Israeli Arabs. And they go out and they talk to the Arabs about keeping the 7 laws of Noah. I don't know anybody in the Jewish world who does that. Only Chabad are crazy enough to do something like that. So we go out because we believe that spreading the light of godliness, of goodness, of morality will bring peace and light to a dark world. And that's what we need more than ever. During the presidency of President Bush the first, Herbert Walker Bush, the Rebbe came out with a campaign of spreading light in the world through random acts of kindness. You might remember that. Some of you remember that many, many years ago. Well, the president's staff heard about it, and they decided that they're going to use that campaign in the president's work as well, by random acts of kindness. And this became a catchword in the United States to the present day, to just do random acts of kindness. Where does it come from? It comes from Hasidus. It comes from Hasidic philosophy. The purpose of exile is the greater and stronger light, godliness, that results specifically from prior darkness. How do you get light through darkness? Bring out the light from the darkness. Now perhaps this is where the Rebbe's campaign of little girls from 3 years old and up to begin lighting Shabbos candles. Well, that practice was in existence long ago. We know that Rivka, our mother, who we're talking about in this week's Parsha, who married Yitzchak, Rivka came into the tent of Sarah after Sarah had passed away, and she lit the Shabbos candles. Our tradition tells us she was only 3 years old when she married Yitzchak. Don't ask me about that, but we can talk about that another time. She was only 3 years old, and she lit the Shabbos candles. And that candle stayed lit from Shabbos to Shabbos, just like the candles of her mother-in-law, Sarah, also stayed lit from Shabbos to Shabbos. Along with that miracle, we found that her dough of her challah was fresh from Shabbos to Shabbos, and a cloud hung over her tent, a cloud of peace, and a cloud of love, and a cloud of protection. What was over her tent as well. So the idea of light is that light dispels darkness. This is a very popular theme in Hasidus. It's a popular theme today as well, where the Rebbe points out that a little bit of light can dispel a great deal of darkness. And we don't only mean in the physical sense. We mean in the spiritual sense as well. The world today, especially now, during so much disagreements in the political realm and scientific realm and all kinds of things, the world today needs more light to dispel the darkness that exists. And that is the theme of Hanukkah, to dispel the darkness. And that's the theme of Torah. When it comes to dispel the darkness, we know that originally the Torah was given on Shavuos, right after the Egyptian exile, which was a very harsh and bitter exile, and the Jewish people entered into the desert, a place of scorpions and spiders and snakes, a very inhospitable place, and Torah, the revelation of Torah, dispelled that darkness, that evil, that negativity as well. So we find that Torah comes, both the external aspect of Torah and the internal aspect of Torah, comes after periods of great darkness and great exile. That's the connection. This is also found in the concept of Shabbos Nevarchim. Rabbi gets back to this theme. In times of the Beis HaMikdash, he says, the idea of blessing new month on the preceding Shabbos did not exist, as I mentioned earlier. The day of Rosh Chodesh was then fixed according to visual testimony, and it was sanctioned on the day itself. So that in the olden days, they blessed the new month on the new month. It was only in exile that the custom of Shabbos Mevarchim was initiated. Only when Jewish people were in exile. On Shabbos, all Jews are in shul, and it is the ideal time to announce which day Rosh Chodesh would be. So it's interesting. In olden days, it was only announced when the month was seen, when the new moon was seen. But during exile, when we are away from our land, and we did not have the new month based on sightings of the eye, so they would start announcing the previous Shabbos when Rosh Chodesh would be, so people would know. In other words, it is the exile which prompted the institution of Shabbos Mevarchim and its associated blessings and strength for the coming month. This teaches us that a Jew, even in exile, has the strength to gather Jews and influence them in the concept of blessing the month. That is, that their service should be renewed as the moon. We bless the new month usually on a Saturday night. Some people do it earlier than that. There are different customs. You can bless the new month as early as the third day. You can bless it as early as the third day of the month. We go outside and we bless the new moon, Kiddush Levana, on the third day, and some as late as the seventh day. But whether it's Shabbos Mevarchim or it's actually sanctifying the moon itself, the idea is that Jewish people come together and they gather together, whether it's in shul Shabbos Mevarchim or it's on doing Kiddush Levana, which after the month started already. It's done ideally with other people, with other Jews around. You should better do it with other people around rather than do it by yourself. The above lesson can be expressed in plainer terms. Jews are not only in exile from their land, but they are in a personal exile. When a Jew prays, he will pray towards Yerushalayim, in the direction of the Beis Hamikdash. In prayer, we must divest ourselves of our surroundings and actually be in the Holy Temple. When we pray, we face the Holy Temple, where the Holy Temple was in Yerushalayim, and we direct our thoughts to the temple. So actually, when we daven, the Rebbe says, we are actually davening in the temple. We are in the temple. We are in the Beis Hamikdash. The Baal Shem Tov said that a person is in the place where his thoughts are. If your thoughts are in a particular place, sometimes when I go to sleep at night and I can't sleep, I think of a pleasant experience that I had in some way. And many psychiatrists and psychologists recommend you do that. If you're having a hard time sleeping, meditate about a nice place that you would like to be or a place that you were at. Meditate on the Beis Hamikdash and Mashiach's coming, and what it's going to be like with Mashiach, the peacefulness. Or meditate the last time you went to Hawaii and you had such a beautiful time by the water, and you were sitting and relaxing, and the beautiful air and things like that. So a person is where their thoughts are. During prayer, a person must direct his thoughts towards the Holy of Holies, and thus be not just the temple, but the Holy of Holies itself, where God's Shekhinah came down and was revealed into the world. And that's where we are, ideally, during our prayers. However, Jews are so sunk in their personal exile that it's impossible for them to direct their thoughts to such a place and to divest themselves from their circumstances. It's hard if we're having problems at home, we're having problems at work. It's difficult for us to get out of that and go into the Holy of Holies. Instead of the great joy of knowing that a person is in the Holy of Holies, one's failure can bring a person to depression and sadness. So we need to redirect our thoughts to positive ways, to positive thoughts. If we're having a difficult time, we should think about having a good time. If we're having problems with our marriage, think about having a good marriage. Think about how much you love your wife and how much you care for her and your children and your family. And if you meditate on that, rather than the problems, the difficulties, meditate on the happy times. You remember what it was like when you met your wife, when you first got married, standing under the chuppah, how beautiful it was, how holy it was. Or when your children were born and how you were just beside yourself. There was nothing more beautiful or happier in your entire life than that. Bring back those thoughts. Bring back those memories. And you will be there. You can be there. And this is the lesson of Kislev. A Jew does not have to wait until the time he attains the level of being in the Beis HaMikdash. Even though we don't have a Beis HaMikdash anymore. Even while in exile, the concept of Kislev gives a Jew strength to convert the darkness of exile into light. Even in exile, a Jew can properly perform his service of spreading Hasidus and illuminating the entire world. We have the ability, even though we're in exile, we can accomplish so much. I think that, I've said this before, that I think more Torah is being learned now in America and in Israel and in Europe than ever in the history of Judaism. More Jews are observant today probably than ever before, at least in modern times, or even in olden times. More Jews are coming back to Jewish observance and becoming Bali Tshuva than ever before. When have we ever seen in Jewish history a movement like the Chabad movement, which is literally all over the world, spreading Judaism, spreading Jewish observance? This coming week will be the Kinnis HaShluchim, the gathering, the annual gathering of all the Chabad rabbis from all over the world. This year it will not be in person because of the virus. It'll be virtual, but they expect more people signing up and more people participating all over the world than ever before. In the past, we've had something like 3,000 or 4,000 people participating in person, and there'll probably be well over 100,000 people this year participating in it online. It's an incredible thing. It's mind-boggling. It's historical. When did something like that ever happen in the history of the Jewish people? He says, furthermore, one's service must be consonant with the ideal of Hanukkah. In the days of the Talmud, not everyone, as we mentioned, lit the menorah, but today we do. So there's more light going on in the world than ever before. And this is all happening in exile. And where do we put the menorah? Facing outwards, outside in the windowsill, or by the door. Or in Israel, they do it in their apartment buildings, in the lobby, outside, with those little glass boxes that they put the candles inside of that, facing outside. Wherever you go in religious communities, you see menorahs all over the place. And it's very inspiring and it's very, very beautiful. Through this, and we've never had this before, only in more modern times, during the times of the Middle Ages and on. Through this service, we abolish the last vestiges of exile. Through that, through bringing light into a dark world, we get rid of the darkness. We get rid of the exile. And immediately we merit to have the true and complete redemption through Mashiach. Then godliness will be revealed to the entire world when the Lord shall be one and his name one. And may that happen immediately, speedily in our days. I want to wish you all a good Chodesh, and God willing, it's going to be wonderful. For Hanukkah, by the way, we're planning a tremendous, tremendous thing. First of all, at UTC, we'll be at UTC again this year. We're not going to be having a big party, but we will be giving out menorahs and jelly donuts and things like that. And we are going to light our big menorah at UTC on the first night of Hanukkah, about 5:30. The program will be from about 5 to 8. You're welcome to come. You need to sign up for that through the UTC's website. And then on Sunday of Hanukkah, we are having the famous singer Guy Elbaz who is going to be doing a concert at the Del Mar Fairgrounds, all by cars. There'll be about 1,000 cars in the Del Mar Fairgrounds listening to a concert with Guy Elbaz. You'll be hearing about that shortly. You will not want to miss that event. It's going to be a tremendous event. There's a charge to it, but it's going to be unbelievable. So keep that in mind for Hanukkah, and we wish you all a very, very happy Kislev, a good Yontif for Yites Kislev, as we say, and a happy Hanukkah as well. Shalom.
Shkoch. Beautiful.